Are you an established small business owner or aspiring entrepreneur? Would you like professional advice to help your business grow and succeed? Well, look no further. The Virgin Islands Small Business Development Center is the territory's #1 resource to move your business forward. Enjoy no-cost advising, low-cost training, and technical assistance from experts in both the public and private sectors. The VISBDC is nationally accredited and sustained by the University of the Virgin Islands and the U.S. Small Business Administration. Visit us at our locations on St. Thomas, St. John, or St. Croix, and follow us on social media at VISBDC. For easy access to all our training and networking events, be sure to join our newsletter and download the VISBDC app. The Virgin Islands Small Business Development Center, here to help your business start, grow, and succeed.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. They say that hope is not a strategy, and when it comes to the survival of your business, that couldn't be more true. Statistics show that roughly 40% to 60% of small businesses never reopen after a disaster. But here is the good news: that doesn't have to be your story. Today's session, Disaster Preparation and Mitigation for Your Business, the time to plan is now, is designed to give you the blueprint you need to ensure that your doors stay open no matter what comes your way. My name is Sharika Industrials Phillips. I am the Network Marketing Coordinator here at the VISBDC. To help us navigate this, I am honored to introduce our presenter for today. He is a dedicated advocate for small businesses across Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. As the SBA Senior Area Manager for the USVI, he has helped countless entrepreneurs access the capital and the confidence they need to compete. Please join me in welcoming Wayne Huddleston. Here's a friendly reminder to place your questions in the chat, and they will be addressed by the presenting team either directly in the chat or later during our question and answer segment. Wayne, you could go ahead and share your screen so that they can see your PowerPoint. A copy of today's presentation will be attached to the post-survey email sent after this live session. We encourage you to take a few minutes of your time to briefly fill out the survey that lets us know how we are doing. This data is essential to us rendering these deliverables complimentary to you. So without further ado, Wayne, the floor is yours.
All right. Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Shrika, for that kind introduction. Yes, as Shrika mentioned, we're going to talk about disaster assistance today. We're a pretty small group, so as I go through this presentation, which itself will be fairly short, feel free to ask any questions, or you can wait to the end. I'm going to give plenty of time for anyone to ask any questions about any of our disaster programs, any tools we have, or really anything related to SBA. We're happy to help. As I mentioned, we're a pretty small group today, and this is usually the case. A lot of people don't typically think about preparing for a disaster until a hurricane is bearing down or something actually happens. But it is just as important to prepare months in advance of any disaster happening as it is to respond effectively to a disaster. So we're going to talk about not only what you can do to help prepare in advance, but also we're going to talk about tools available for recovery after a disaster hits. So one of the biggest things that we always are facing here in the Virgin Islands is the threat of hurricanes every year. And it's probably the most frequent and most costly form of disaster that hits our territory. So we're always on the lookout for that. And we always know every year there's going to be possibility for disasters related to fire or some other issue, but there's always a hurricane season that we're going to have to contend with. And making sure that you properly assess your risk is important. So showing this as kind of an example of hurricane forecasts that come out and then how they impact the islands. In 17, it was predicted to be a fairly low year. We ended up having or they were predicting 2 to 4 major hurricanes. In 2024, it was 4 to 7. 2025, it was 3 to 5, and right now it was 2. But when you compare that to what has been happening, you'll see that when it was a fairly low year of probability, we had 2 Category 5 hurricanes, not just hurricanes, but Category 5 hurricanes. 2 of them back to back hit our territory and caused massive devastation, from which we are still in the recovery process. In 2024, they were expected to be more significant years, more likely hurricanes, and nothing touched us, not even a low-level hurricane. We had nothing. So the big takeaway from this is I want to make sure everyone understands there is no strong correlation between the number of storms predicted and the impact to our territory at any given season. We should prepare every year, no matter what the forecast is. We've got to be prepared for what may come our way, because we don't always have the luxury of knowing when a hurricane is coming or when any disaster hits. Most people who are affected by fire the day before probably weren't thinking at all that they'd be dealing with that the next day. So it's always important to prepare ahead of time, because you never know. And when you don't, you run the cause or the possibility of closure and not reopening. As Sharika mentioned in the beginning, it's been estimated that 25% of businesses permanently close after a disaster and do not reopen. And largely it's because they were not prepared in advance or did not take advantage of the resources necessary to get them back on their feet. So the very first thing that everyone should be thinking about is to have a disaster plan, to think through what you need to do should a disaster hit. There are basic elements to that plan, the basic elements being establish a communications plan. How are you going to communicate with your employees, with your customers, with others, your important suppliers, if that's a part of your business? How are you going to protect your documents? Do you have them stored online? Are they all on paper? Do you have them in a safe place? Make sure you review your insurance coverage every year to make sure it's sufficient and that it can cover the needs that may happen. I know this is expensive down here, but it makes the difference between reopening and not reopening oftentimes. Create a solid supply chain, especially if you are in a retail business and rely on supply chains for your operations. Plan for an alternate location if needed. If you can't work at your location, you need another place, make sure you think about where that's going to be. And then practice and exercise your plan with your staff if you have it, and make sure you that everyone understands what needs to get done should it happen. So we're going to talk about a few other elements of that. One of the main things is to consider how your business is going to stay open. There are a lot of functions in your company that you may not be thinking about that your company relies upon, such as power, and having a generator or an alternate source of power is important if you need that. How you're going to access the internet if you need internet access to continue your business. But you should think about all those and how you're going to continue operating in the weeks and months after a disaster. As I mentioned before, insurance is very important. You want to make sure, one, that you have it, and I understand many businesses struggle with this because of the high cost of insurance in their territory. And I wish it was lower, and I wish there was something I can do about it, but it's very difficult, and it's just a tough pill to swallow. But I encourage everyone to make sure that you get some level of insurance. It's just not worth the risk, considering where we live, the frequency of possible disasters. Part of insurance policies, you want to make sure that there aren't any carve-outs for things that could affect you. So sometimes insurance policies will say, well, we'll give you this policy, but we won't cover this sort of liability, or we won't cover windstorm damage, or we won't cover something else. You want to make sure that the insurance you have covers the likely disaster scenarios that you intended to. And then you might want to consider something called business interruption insurance, which covers operating expenses or lost income in the event of a business shutdown. So if your business shuts down or your customers just can't be a customer anymore for whatever reason, depending on your industry, this insurance will compensate you for that. There are a lot of fantastic examples out there too that I highly recommend are ready.gov /business. That is a tool created by FEMA. It provides a lot of great checklists, a lot of templates and disaster planning tools that you can use for all sorts of scenarios, whether that be hurricane or fire or earthquake or pandemic or whatever. It helps you, instead of just trying to start from scratch, you can have this tool to kind of walk through it. Same with disastersafety.org. I think their website is even easier to navigate than the ready.gov one. And they also provide a lot of fantastic tools. These are not the only ones, but these are two that I find to be especially helpful. But there are plenty of other tools out there, including one of your best resources is the Small Business Development Center itself. Their staff are well trained on the development of a disaster preparedness plan and can help walk you through this as well. We're going to go through the next section of this presentation that after the disaster does hit, what recovery resources are available to you when that happens so that you can know where to go immediately. I'm going to focus on SBA's tools. Our tools are really the private source of federal assistance to help private owners pay for losses not covered by insurance. We offer low interest loans to businesses of all size, but also nonprofit organizations, homeowners, and renters. We normally, SBA does not, when there's not a disaster, does not provide loans to nonprofit organizations, homeowners, and renters, but in times of disaster, we do. And these are very long-term loans with excellent interest rates designed to help people get back up and running and on their feet as soon as possible. Our program is activated when there is a federal disaster declaration by FEMA, SBA, or USDA. The governor also has to authorize this as well, but I want to make sure it's clear that just because a governor creates a local disaster declaration, that does not allow SBA and FEMA to come in, or USDA. That requires a federal disaster declaration. You can always keep track of all the current disaster declarations. It says by county here, but you can distill it by island, because there are times when St. Croix or St. Thomas or St. John may have a disaster declaration and the other islands do not. That happens sometimes. But you can always check the status of disaster declarations just by going to lending.sba.gov /search disaster, and that's always kept up to date daily. So when those are activated and SBA is allowed and authorized to provide loans, there are some basic eligibility requirements. One is that the property must be in a declared county or declared island, declared territory. Whatever that property is that the loan is going for, it must be sitting in a disaster area. There must have basic credit history acceptable to SBA, and applicants must show the ability to repay loans. Now, the credit history is a fairly low threshold, but you still do not want to have a credit report that shows a consistent history of not paying obligations. You may be able to have a few negative marks on there and still be able to get approval, but you want to make sure your credit is reasonable. Additionally, you must show the ability to repay loans, and how SBA largely determines the ability, not just the ability to be eligible for a loan, but the amount of loan that would be authorized is through tax returns. And I understand a lot of people try to minimize their tax burden and sometimes understate the amount of income they make in order to do that. But that has that can have a bad effect if a disaster strikes. I've seen where businesses were deeply disappointed because SBA did not provide a very large loan, and he offered a very small loan. And they said, well, this doesn't nearly at all cover my expenses. My business is much bigger than that. And we pulled the tax returns and says, well, officially, it's not. This is what you report. This is the revenue you report. We have to make a loan based on these official records. And so if that official tax return understates your income, just know that that will impact the amount of loan that you would be eligible for under the SBA disaster program. If you are eligible, you can apply for up to $500,000 to replace or repair a primary residence. You can also, even if you're a renter, you can borrow up to $100,000 to replace personal property if you can show that that has been lost. Secondary homes not eligible, but if you have a rental property as a business, that might be able to be eligible. You can't use it to upgrade or make additions to the house, but you can be eligible for up to 20% increase if you are seeking a loan to rebuild your property and then also add some features that can mitigate against a future hurricane. So for instance, if you are replacing windows in your property, you may be able to have a little bit more to make those hurricane-proof windows. Payments are deferred for 12 months, so that first year. Interest rate does not exceed 4%. It's typically around 3.75 or 3.5. It kind of depends at the time, but it will not exceed 4%. You have up to 30 years to repay that loan. And then collateral is required on loans over $50,000. And this is for personal property. For business physical disaster loans, you can go all the way up to $2 million. Proceeds from insurance, however, coverage must be deducted from the eligible loan amount. You can use it for the same purposes, repair, replacing real property, and making improvements. But it can't be used to upgrade or expand a business. You can use 20% of it for mitigation, though. Same terms for the most part, 12 months deferral, interest rate doesn't exceed 4%. If there is available credit to you elsewhere, though, that interest rate can go up, but will not exceed 8%. You still have 30 years to repay, and there's still a collateral requirement on any loans over $50,000. And then finally, there's what we call economic injury disaster loans. These are not for actual physical property, but are for economic injury due to the disaster. So if you're not receiving income, if your customers have dried up, this can be used for working capital to cover your bills and expenses, but it can't be used again to for buying fixed assets. Can't buy a new car, expand your facility, refinance debt, those types of things. This is just to help get through in a time of crisis and pay bills. Similar terms, deferred for 12 months, will not exceed 4%, up to 30 years to repay, but collateral, again, is required on any loan over $50,000. As I mentioned earlier, there needs to be a basic credit analysis of it. You play a role in this as well, and that is making sure you have proper accounting, proper profit and loss statements, and gross receipts. If you have an accountant that can put these together, these are excellent tools to have. And it just expedites your ability to get that loan if you have those documents ready to go. Your tax filings need to be honest, correct, and on time. You need to maintain a good credit score. You need to plan and forecast income appropriately and use resources correctly. So oftentimes in disaster, that makes a difference between getting your loan fast and sometimes getting it at all. The people who have these statements ready to go to submit immediately can get that loan pretty quickly. But if you don't have it, it takes time. You don't have to wait for a presentation such as this. There are lots of fantastic information on our site, sba.gov/disaster. We also have a customer service center that is answered every day, 1-800-659-2955. That's an automated system, but it doesn't take long to get to a customer service agent. They can answer just about any question you have. If you have an existing loan, you should have your loan number with you and give that to them so they can pull your file up. And once they verify it's you, they can help you with servicing that loan. Or you can send an email to disastercustomerservice@sba.gov. I always encourage people that if you do have a a question that you want to email or an issue you want to email disaster customer service at sba.gov, please copy me. I would not be the one replying, but just that if you copy me, make sure that there is a reply and that it's sufficient and help you if you run into any issues. I typically cannot answer their questions for them on disaster loans, but I can make sure that they're going to be responsive to you. There are lots of great resources here. As I mentioned, SBA partners, all of these are SBA partners, SBDC, SCORE, and VBOC. SBDC has invested a lot of resources in making sure people have the ability to develop disaster plans. Their counselors are well versed in this area. They can help you out with that. Same with SCORE. They have a lot of good templates and a lot of fantastic volunteer mentors who can help. And for those that are veterans or family members of veterans who own businesses, we have a Veterans Business Outreach Center. It's located in Puerto Rico, but they do come to the Virgin Islands frequently and certainly can assist with disaster planning or anything else related to your business. All of these are free of charge. They have already, well, they're paid for with public funds. So if you pay taxes, you paid for them already, I guess. But there's no additional charge when you ask for help from these entities. So that's it for my presentation. I will now open it up to any questions. I think you can either unmute or type it in chat if you like.
Alrighty, thank you for that, Wayne. And you are correct. You can put your questions in the chat or you can unmute and ask directly. Okay, hearing none. Wayne, thank you so much for your presentation. And I guess I can go ahead and proceed to show what the SBDC has in store with regards to training. So I'm going to share my screen, and this is the SBDC website. And so with regards to training, I want you to go to the training tab, select events. It will take you to this page. These are just some of the few areas that we've covered thus far. And here is the registration portal. So today's webinar, at the end of this session, it will be available to you so you can watch at your leisure. But what I want you to do is to make sure that for center, you have all for the event type. Please select on demand. And when you hit search, it will appear here. And you can go ahead and watch that when you have time. With regards to what events we have coming up, tomorrow, the Agriculture Business Center has an event, Learning Under the Mahogany, Sustainable and Organic Practice in Action. So that's a workshop happening tomorrow, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. We actually have the local SCORE chapter. They're doing an introduction webinar tomorrow at 11 a.m. Go ahead and register. We have two different Canva workshops hosted by the Agriculture Business Center, and this will help persons create social media posts, flyers, and so much more. So we have a morning session on May 20th that starts at 10 a.m. and goes until 11:30. And then there's an evening session that starts at 6 p.m. and it goes until 7:30. On May 26th, Wayne returns to deliver the 5 C's of SBA loan eligibility, and that webinar will start at 10. On May 27th, the Agriculture Business Center will be hosting Agriculture Marketing Webinar Series Introduction. And so that will be from 6 p.m. to 7:30. And then we have collaborated with our local VBAC that's out of Puerto Rico and the USVI, and they're bringing forth a webinar series. It's going to be Thursdays in June. So on June 4th at 10 a.m., they're starting with the introduction to business ownership. On June 11th, it's going to be focused on understanding markets and your competitive space. On June 18th, the economics of small business startup. And on June 25th, introduction to business planning. So let me go back to the live event. Wait, see if we have any questions. We do not. So once again, Wayne, it's always a pleasure collaborating with you on initiatives as such. And to everyone in our audience, on behalf of the entire VISBDC network, we thank you for your time and attendance, and we wish you a productive rest of day. Bye, everyone.